Good morning. I am Emily Cranwell, a member here at UUFE and one of this morning's service leaders, and I am joined by Leigh Marquess. I'm grateful to see so many faces here with us in the sanctuary this morning. I will begin with the words of Melanie Morel Ensminger, "Come, come, whoever you are." Come, come, whoever you are welcome here. No matter your age, your size, the color of your eyes, your hair, your skin, you are welcome here. No matter how you came here, if you came alone or with others, you are welcome here. No matter whom you love or how you speak or whatever your abilities, you are welcome here. Whether you come with laughter in your heart or tears in your eyes, you are welcome here. If you come here with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands, then you are indeed welcome here.
Draw the circle wide. Draw the circle wide. No one stands alone, we'll stand side by side. Draw the circle wide.
So a centering moment of music as we come to our message this morning. Over the last few weeks, we've been considering our sense of belonging here within this congregation. We've been asking those gathered on Sunday mornings to consider how we can offer deep welcome to our members, friends, and our community. How can we be a place of radical hospitality? And last week, Christina and Michelle Droston led a conversation about inclusion, equity, and diversity, and asked us to think about the ways that we offer welcome at UUFE. They asked us to consider how once we open the door, widen the circle, welcome new people enthusiastically to UUFE, do they truly feel welcome? Christina also reminded us that diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts seek to create meaningful, systemic change towards a more equitable environment, and also that the way forward is a long process, a process that requires true listening, opening our minds, reflecting, learning, understanding, interacting, affirming, adjusting, and repeating over and over. So today we will also consider how we might offer a richness of experience where all feel included and a part of not just UUFE, but a broader sense of the Unitarian Universalist tradition. And I will discuss too some of the ways that the UUA has fallen short of their own stated principles over the years. This summer I've been taking an online class about UU history, starting all the way back with the rebels and heretics that questioned early Christian orthodoxy. We traced the history into early America and how the Unitarian and Universalist theologies spread throughout our country. We've read stories about many missionaries and leaders of our faith whose powerful efforts have been embraced, such as those who were active during the Civil Rights Movement, or the abolitionist Theodore Parker, who questioned and worked against the Fugitive Slave Act in 1850. But there have been many others, such as W.H.G. Carter, who founded a Unitarian congregation in Cincinnati in 1918 that was likely the only African-American Unitarian congregation in the United States at that time. Unfortunately, despite an active congregation and the work that Reverend Carter was doing to advocate for poor blacks in Cincinnati, when a member of the AUA, the national organization at that time, visited his church 20 years after its creation, it wasn't funded because it was in the wrong part of town. Soon thereafter, it shut down. And so our class has been grappling with these missed opportunities. The places where the UUA our Association of Congregations, over the years, has perpetuated white supremacy or centered whiteness. There have been many voices that the UUA has silenced over the years, and voices that have simply been left out of our history, or quite literally left out of our hymnal. In my reading and preparation for today's service, I came across a powerful reflection from Reverend Rebecca Savage titled, "The Healing is Not Done," and wanted to share part of her reflection with you today as one example of how a person of color has reflected on their more recent experience within the UU community. She states, "I play this moment over and over again in my head, the day I heard of the Thomas Jefferson Ball, hosted by Unitarian Universalists in 1993. As a person of color raised in a UU congregation, I felt a shiver down my spine as I learned something new and unsettling about the faith that I call home." You may be wondering why this gathering of UUs in 1993 struck me as a profoundly memorable and painful moment. Beloveds, this is why. Attendees were encouraged to wear period clothes to the ball to celebrate Thomas Jefferson, who attended Unitarian churches. In the spirit of welcome, those who conceived of this social gathering did not take into account the centering of whiteness by asking people to attend in period dress. The organizers forgot or ignored the fact that in Jefferson's time, we black and brown UUs would have been slaves, property to be traded and sold, brutalized, and subjected. The matter was taken up at General Assembly when delegates challenged the appropriateness of holding this event. During a plenary session, delegates voiced their concerns by reading a statement of protest. In response, the organizers and other leaders gathered to consider how to proceed and came to a decision. The Thomas Jefferson Ball would proceed ahead as planned. This isn't just a reflection about my lived experience as a person of color in a majority white denomination. This is also part of the story of how people of color experience sharing worship and community within our faith. It's a chapter in the story of who we are as a people, living in this country, swimming in the waters of white supremacy and centering whiteness, supported by centuries of indoctrinations and institutional structures. I ignite my flame of justice and shine a light on this scar because the healing is not done. The healing is not done because we are still called to do the work of dismantling white supremacy culture and decentering whiteness from our homes, from our congregations, from the ways in which we interact and support each other. We are called to fulfill the promises once made in the name of faith and proclaiming beloved community. We are called to match our words with our actions, to bring the holy into our midst by truly and without fear honoring the inherent worth and dignity of every person. So her story leads us this morning to the UUA's initiative to study the realities of UU groups today. The UUA staff and its congregations. In 2017, based on reported incidents, a group was commissioned to consider the barriers to inclusion at the UUA. In a thorough study led by the Unitarian Universalist Association that took place over 3 years and was released in 2020, the study noted story after story when the values of inclusion were not lived out. In short, the UUA looked closely and found that words of inclusion don't make it so, particularly on matters of race. The study noted that often the UUA began programs and then didn't keep up funding. There were hiring practices that didn't truly open positions to all, and there was a set of norms of who would be a good fit. And those most impacted by these practices were Black, Indigenous, and people of color. You may remember that Dick Dowdy spoke to us about what he learned from this report after he virtually attended the General Assembly in 2020. He described the report as essential reading for every Unitarian Universalist and ask that we consider forming a group to continue to take significant time to digest and determine what action steps might be appropriate at the congregational level. Reverend Sue also responded to her experience and told us that UUs need to look in the mirror. The power of we is and will continue to be hamstrung if we prioritize our comfort over getting to the work needed to move toward deep inclusion. There are ways the UUA as an institution sustains the culture of white supremacy. It's not just the unexpected oops. Now and then, there are systemic and structural aspects in our actions. The report is quite hefty, 228 pages. There's a whole book and a couple copies floating around. But it centers around 10 main areas within the national, regional, and congregational UU life. While it offers many suggestions for governance, religious professionals, and reparations at the UUA level, it also offers suggestions on the congregational level that ask us to examine our welcoming practices. The report speaks to the ideas that unconscious bias is real, that unconscious bias, when unaddressed, creates toxic organizations, that many congregations have not addressed this and so can be toxic to people of color, that addressing unconscious bias requires education, not guilt, that most Unitarian Universalist congregations and organizations need ongoing intention, education, and structural change in order to be hospitable to all. That there are many good tools available to do this work. That too often congregations must do this challenging work by themselves when learning communities would be easy to form. And that congregations that choose to engage to increase equity, inclusion, and diversity are leading the way into the future. And so I ask us to consider today the ways our congregation might begin or continue to grapple with this work moving forward. How can we do the work of matching our words set forth in our principles with our actions?
I think that some of our answers and continuing questions have kind of blended these questions together, which certainly makes sense as we explore our own experiences and then try to figure out how we can be more welcoming, what do we need to do. So what do we need to consider to be inclusive? Are we considering socioeconomic status? Are we considering their biases? Are we considering what? So what are we considering when we are thinking about how we can be more welcoming? What should we consider as we welcome people?
take-home question as we finish up today. Because in the coming weeks, we're going to continue to discuss ways that UUFE can be most authentically inclusive. And recommendations in the Widening the Circle report ask us to acknowledge that anti-oppression work is a theological mandate of our faith. So, as we leave today, we can start to think about this reflection, be thinking about our own experiences with Unitarian Universalism, and think about how could this commitment to anti-oppression work find expression in our worship? How would a commitment to anti-oppression work shape our congregational life? How would a commitment to anti-oppression work shape our community relations, particularly alongside marginalized members of our faith as well as in the larger community? So questions to take home and think about as we come together over the next few weeks of summer and continue the conversation.
Spirit of life and love, dear God of all nations, there is so much work to do. We've only begun to imagine justice and mercy. Help us to hold fast to our vision of what can be. May we seek a hope in our history and find the courage and the voice to work for that constant rebirth of freedom and justice. That is our dream. Amen. We close today grateful for this community, grateful for our shared learning. Go in peace, go in love. Go knowing love surrounds you wherever you may go.